So I think there's might be two types of inspections, in my opinion, and correct me if you support this or not. But when you first go to a property to look at it, and you're getting interviewed to rent it, let's say the owner says that you got it accepted and you get to rent the property. That's you performing an inspection on that property. Once that agreement's signed, you're moving in. Any visit afterwards now is going to be the inspection performed by the property management company.
Yeah.
So your turn to inspect it is up front. They're going to inspect it every inspection thereafter. So that initial inspection, I would be very cautious on, or not cautious, but I'd be very detailed. I'd be very detailed on the type of inspections that you perform. How thorough are you going to be during that inspection?
Yeah, because as a landlord, we have pictures of the house and it looks immaculate online. And let's say there's a hole in the wall. Let's just use the hole in the wall example.
And that's going to show up in the inspection picture, right?
Yep. And so if I go back in and say, gosh, there's a hole in the wall now, and you say, well, that was there before. Well, the burden of proof is on you as the tenant to prove that it was there when you took possession. And so you have to have a picture of it. Now keep in mind that digital pictures have date stamps on it. You can't falsify when that picture's taken. So if you take it the day the landlord's asking you about it and it's 6 months after you've moved in, that picture doesn't prove your point at all. In fact, it damns you, in a sense. It condemns you to that fact that you probably caused that hole. Think about how a judge would look at it in a small claims environment. So I think Scott's got a good point here of take the time. It's going to take a little bit of time. A walkthrough inspection should take you about a half an hour to go through, so it's not the end of the world. But it's going through and say, let's take a couple of pictures of how the carpet looks. Now, you're not looking for perfection. You're just documenting what the condition looked like, right?
Sure, yeah.
So if the stain's already there, the stain's there. It is what it is. What you're documenting is that you didn't create the stain. It was there when you took possession.
Yeah,
right?
Because it's going to come up when you move out.
Yeah.
That is there. How do you show that it was there before? So you're
case in point is it's about protecting yourself, because when you go to move out, should be your second inspection that you do, and you do that with your landlord, saying, "I'm returning it back over to you. Do you accept it?" Because the landlord is going to have a look at it and says, "Well, I'm going to accept it, but there's this that you either have to correct, or I'm going to have to correct and charge you for it and go against your deposit."
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a misconception out there that all landlords are just out to get your deposit money. Well, there's no margin in fixing up houses. As landlords, we do not make money doing repairs. In fact, it's the exact opposite. For me to send out a maintenance person might cost me $100 an hour, right? To patch that hole, I'm not making money in that in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
I'm going to cover my costs. I just hope your deposit lasts long enough to cover my costs, but it's not a money-making source for me.
Shouldn't be. Some landlords might, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it shouldn't be is the answer.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through some of the type of things to look for. Like when a tenant's going in the house, what are some things that they should really inspect for? So I would look at overall condition. Is when you go into the house, is the overall condition of the home clean or not? Is there dents in the wall? Is there like major things? Is it look clean? Most of the time it's going to be pristine when you move in, when you go there.
Now, as a general rule, I think our industry calls it broom clean. There might be some dusts and stuff there, but it should be free of major debris.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have dead bugs in the middle.
Shouldn't have dead bugs. The stoves should not be full of grease.
Yeah, it should be clean and ready to go.
The refrigerator should be cleaned out, wiped out. It shouldn't have popsicle stain coming down.
There should be some things that you should demand on that.
So appliances, you want to make sure all the appliances are working. It's perfectly fine for you to test a gas stove and make sure all the burners are working.
Yep.
Light it. Start the dishwasher. Open the fridge. Make sure the lights are on in the fridge. Make sure it's cool in both of them. Fridges or freezers may not be working fully when you move in, and the only way to know that is test it. So
these modern appliances, they sense material inside the unit, and they will adjust their thermostats automatically. So sometimes you might not be able to test a fridge, just as an example, until you
Okay.
put food in it in a modern,
Okay.
out there. It's just one of those
That's
unique
more
things.
modern than what I'm
Yeah,
used to, but yeah, you're right.
I see that in my vacation homes because I'll have a fridge that sits empty for a week. It's on and plugged in, but there's nothing in it. The
So
fridge
it's
knows that it's empty, and so it goes into a power saving mode.
interesting. Okay.
And it runs bare minimum. And so until it has food in it, then it starts to cool. But that's
Okay.
probably a diversion topic in long term rental
Yeah, that's
type
great.
environment out there. But
Some other things to look for. Just kind of lean on the counter. Maybe pull it up a little bit. Does it come up 2
don't
inches?
jerk on it, but you want to make
Or
sure that
not.
it's stable, right?
Yeah. Don't break it.
Make sure the toilet's not wobbly.
Yeah. Like sit on the toilet, maybe with the lid down, and just kind of sit and see how secure it is. That's really good. Doors, closets. Do all the doors work? All the windows open? Blinds work? Just kind of test everything. Don't feel like you're taking this guy's or gal's too much time because you're doing this research. Feel free to do that. I would look for water stains under the sink.
Yeah, very good. That's a really good point.
Sometimes just a pinhole in that water drips, and that kind of leads to mold or some other health issues. But if there's a little water stain underneath there, it's a good indication there's been a problem.
In reality, again, this is just a time to document. It's not that you're giving them a punch list and you got to come and fix all of these things. We're just noting the condition as it is today. Yep. I'll accept it as it is. But at the same time, if you find something that's not acceptable, let's take that water leak under the sink. If it's an active leak and it's causing an issue, I don't want to put my stuff underneath there.
Yeah.
That's when I want to call the landlord up and say, hey, this has got to be fixed.
Yeah, but if you're there the first day and you see it dripping or it's wet, it opens for discussion and kind of pins it on them to be the ones to repair it.
Yeah.
Other things, screens we talked about a little earlier, but screens, all the screens attached? Are they in good condition, or are they damaged? Any stains or cuts in the floor? So if a prior person had a dog and they decided not to replace the carpets, there would be scratch marks in the carpet.
Yeah, or tear marks or whatever.
Tears, yeah. Have the filters been replaced? We talked about that. So just kind of a broad rule of thumb: the older the home, the worse the condition, the more to document. Good ways to document would be photographs, and don't be afraid to do a walkthrough with a video. And so sometimes taking a video in a room, you might get different angles of a different things, so that if there's an issue, you can have that video play it back and see things you otherwise couldn't have. So what about, so that's more kind of what to look for. Anything else that you'd say that a tenant should look for when they're going to do their initial walkthrough inspection? What should they be worried
I would
about?
say how many keys you're receiving, how many garage door openers,
Okay.
garage door openers function.
Take a picture of those.
Sensors work. Yep, take a picture of them. Be smart in your filing. Your digital copies. Create a folder out there specifically for that property and put all the pictures in there. Most of us have gone to tenant portal systems where the copy of our lease is out there. It doesn't hurt to take a copy of that lease and upload it into your file as well. But you can also share and upload copies of your pictures and what you saw out there to that tenant portal so the landlord has it. Again, going back to the concept of communication is you're not holding this to have a private thing. It's so that they're on record knowing that you know what it was like. Because at the end of the day, if you had to go to court, the judge just wants to do what's fair and correct. Yeah. He doesn't want to favor the landlord. He doesn't want to favor the tenant. He just wants to make sure it's right. Yeah. And the better documentation you have on your side, the stronger position you have, for that out there. Okay,
so let's switch now to the landlord.
Yep.
Or the owner.
Periodic inspection.
Coming to do a periodic inspection, and that can be as often or as little as they choose. Really, it's on them to actually do that. You don't need to call and remind them and say, "Hey, are you coming to do your inspection?" Unless you are planning around that inspection, like as a tenant, I'm going to have a party this weekend, and make sure that he's not going to come or she's not going to come during my family visit, but I'm going to make sure it's ready for when they come. So you may make sure they're coming on a certain day.
And if you're only going to clean your house twice a year, and it always coincides with when the landlord's going to do the inspection, then you're not a good tenant out there, and you're living in squalor.
Strategic tenant, but not probably.
But not one that a landlord would want to keep there. But the inspection shouldn't be a point of contention. It certainly can be, and if you have a homeowner that, and I've actually had a homeowner like this that was a new home or a new investor, and he worried about everything. He wanted to go buy at all times of the day, and he'd walk onto the property unannounced and just say, "Oh, I'm just in the backyard just checking on this fence," or whatever, come up with some kind of thing. They can't do that. When you sign a lease, you are signed on that you have what's called quiet enjoyment, right? Doesn't mean your next door neighbor won't play, Def Leppard. It's not that kind of quiet, but it's that you will have peace and security in that home. The landlord waives his right to access to that property under any condition, with the exception of a very few. They can come on if there's an active fire or flood to protect the home, right? But they can't come on just because they think you might be
smoking
inside the house. They can't just randomly show up and say, "Hey, I'm here to do an inspection," and expect you to drop what you're doing and walk through there. And unfortunately, too many tenants aren't aware of that right. And I think they let the landlord, because they are the landlord.
And they want to be kind, and they want to build relationships, and they want to accommodate. Yeah.
I think they let themselves be walked over. And so if you take nothing else from this conversation is you as a tenant have some very specific rights that are reasonable, and if the landlord crosses them, you've got some good protections, especially in the state of Utah. The state of Utah is a very balanced judge, or the laws are very balanced. It doesn't favor one side or the other more so than the other. It's very balanced out there. And so I think just a general rule is those inspections should be part of your lease that are allowed, but the landlord should give you reasonable notice. Now, there's some laws out there, take a note on this, but it's called the Fit Premise Act, the Utah Fit Premises Act. It's a simple piece of legislation, but it's really the foundation for your rights as a tenant out there. It can actually supersede the terms of a lease in some aspects. That a landlord can work within these parameters. He can go above and beyond the parameters, but he can't shorten those parameters, right? It's a minimal level of expectation that you as a tenant have out there. And right to quiet enjoyment is the foundation of that out there.
Yeah, so that's a kind of a delicate thing. How do you handle that if the landlord's a really nice old guy, and he just calls you and says, "I need to come and do this"? Like, how, as a tenant, how do you tell him respectfully no?
Yeah, say, "Hey, that doesn't work in my schedule." This would be a scenario that I'd try to go through. It's like, "Sorry, it doesn't work in my schedule. I need a reasonable notice, and it has to be for a reasonable purpose." And it's okay for you to ask, "Well, why do you need to come over?" "Oh, I'm just worried about this branch in the tree." Well, that's probably not a reasonable purpose to come over, right?
Unless they got a notice from the power company that says, "Hey, you got to remove this tree," then that's an important thing, or you got to trim this tree. So,
but if he's just coming over to put his nose in your business, that's not a reasonable purpose, right? There's no purpose for him to come over and spend Sunday afternoon at your house, right, uninvited. So they have to have a purpose. Typically, when we go out to give notice, today's age, we can send a text over or an email. Sometimes we have to post it, but we will actually state in there, "Here's the reason why we want to come." And I try and work with them around their schedules, because I know that they're working,
Yeah.
If they say, "Hey, we want to be there, Wednesday at 2:00 in the afternoon," well, you might still be working. That's not convenient for you in any way, shape, or form. It's okay for you to say no, but, I get off at 5 and we do 5:30. The landlord should accommodate that because it's reasonable, And you can give them permission to go into your house when you're not there. I personally wouldn't, because it's my personal home. I don't want people I don't know or have a relationship with just going through my home. You can't deny them for being unreasonable, as long as you have a reasonable alternative. Like, you can't say, "Well, how about 1 a.m. On a Sunday?" Well, that might not be reasonable. Now, if you work nights or strange hours, there might be some accommodations to be met there, but it has to be a give and take on both sides. It has to be reasonable.
That's a really good point, because what if the landlord is unreasonable and the tenant is trying to be reasonable, right? That's a difficult agreement to make, but sometimes landlords will force themselves in. Hey, I gave you a 24-hour notice. That's all I'm required to do. I will be there at 3 o'clock tomorrow. And you're like, hey, that doesn't work, right?
That is actually within the state law that they can do it that direction. I think I'm trying to think of the English word for it. I think it's a rotten practice that could happen.
Yeah.
I've rarely seen that happen, but I've heard of landlords that will do that. But yeah, knowing that you may not be able to stop them from coming in if they give you that type of notice, be prepared for it.
So they legally can do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
One way around that might be just to say, 3 o'clock's a really bad time. Can you guys do it 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock? Give them another option of a time that works better. Yep. Try to be accommodating to them. Don't just be mad at them and they're coming in and match. Try to talk through that and keep that relationship going with that landlord. And maybe the next day at 3 would work. It depends on what they want to come in for, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to jump back to kind of our earlier topic of, if the homeowner's selling their home and now they want to start showing the house. Well, in our current real estate market, I have, 2 people today, 5 tomorrow, an open house on the weekend. How accommodating do you need to be for an open house? It's not an inspection. Yeah. This is now an open house. And I think there's a distinction there that you don't have to allow showings in your home for a real estate purpose unless it's part of your lease. But inspections you do have to permit, right, within a reasonable notice. And here comes the conundrum of
the agent calls you as the owner or as the tenant to the tenant, and
or they expect you to have your house clean to do these showings.
Yeah, and the showings happen all the time. Like every day, there's 2 or 3 realtors bringing in new buyers to check this home out. Yeah. That gets frustrating, really frustrating for a tenant.
Well, it taxes a tenant to the nth degree because you think of the stress of, am I going to have a house to live in 5 months from now, or am I going to have to go find another house and go through that process? But at the same time, well, how can I accommodate? Because maybe the house I'm in is going to get a new investor, and I'd like to continue with that new investor. So, what level of accommodation should I have out there? That's a thin line to look at. It helps to ask some of those questions out there.
Yeah.
On that.
Maybe write this down. That's something to discuss when you're signing that lease agreement with the landlord. Keep track of all these things to make a list of when you're signing the lease. Who would think about that? Them selling the property and you showing it be interrupted with all these agents showing while they're trying to occupy property. Nobody's going to think about that. So don't let it happen down the road. Discuss it at the time you lease. Like
that's the best time to have that conversation.
Yeah.
It's the best understanding, and again, it comes back to being a good tenant. Really has a foundation of good communication out there.
So if an owner was selling it, I would probably bring it up to them and say, what happens if you sell this property while I'm renting the property? How will that happen? What does that look like? And then maybe outline, give them your opinion that, hey, I don't like interruptions. If you guys sell it, can you just limit your showings to weekends, from this time? And kind of, if you can put that in the initial agreement in your lease, then you don't have to worry about it later on.
Those are some good things to have a conversation about, because if you've ever gone through a landlord selling the house and you're expected to have your house clean at any moment, and last minute show ups are the worst of the ones that are unannounced. They just come knock on the door and say, hey, we're just passing through, can we take a look at the house? Well, no, I'm eating dinner right now. I don't have to be accommodating to that, but at the same time, just know what your lease says about that. But coming back to the inspection process, what does a landlord generally look for? One of the questions I put up here is can a landlord take pictures during an inspection? And for
Good
what
point.
purpose? You
Yeah.
know, I have my personal things, you know, like
Jewelry.
my
yeah.
son and his wife are currently adopting children. They're wards of the state. By law, they can't be published out on social media because of the adoption process, right?
Interesting.
So you have to look and say, does a landlord have a right to take pictures? And the answer is, it depends, right? They can take pictures if they notice an issue. Let's say there is a drip under the sink. They should be able to take a picture of the drip under the sink, but they shouldn't be able to zoom out and take a picture of your whole kitchen and show that, oh, this person didn't do the dishes for a long period of time, or they're a pig, or they,
Yeah.
you know. And the landlord shouldn't be taking those pictures for the purpose of posting online. Like, hey, you guys want to see a dirty kitchen? You know, here's the Jones family at 123 Baker Street or whatever. Look at how horrible they are. You know, you don't want to be the Jones family. Now they create defamation. Of course, those are obviously extremes, but knowing where your privacy is that landlord shouldn't take a picture of the whole living room, but he should focus on just, there's a hole in the wall, right? Type of scenario. It should be very focused, very narrow with a purpose.
So if the landlord comes into my apartment and starts taking pictures of every room on every inspection,
You have a right to say, hey, delete those pictures. You know, because they have to have a purpose for that picture.
but it's just for record keeping, Kendall. I'm just here to record the condition, and I do this every inspection.
Yeah, but
I'm playing devil's advocate
Yeah.
again. You know,
I
it's,
think you'd have a position there saying, hey, if there's not an issue, I'd ask you not to take a picture of my personal effects.
yeah.
Right? Because what if there's something, I'll use the term of intimate in nature, that gets in the background? Now you've created an embarrassment.
Yeah.
And now your relationship with your tenant can be strained because they wonder, like, well, what did they see? What do they think about me? You know, it could be a huge impact. You know, so I think there's some sensitivity there. A good landlord will not take pictures in general, unless it's a specific issue they want to correct.
So what are
Now-
some things that they're? Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think you're leading
Okay.
into the question. Well, what if the tenant is a slob? Then yeah, it's necessary to document for a corrective action, right? And that is a purpose. They can take a picture and say, you know, I had one tenant that had like 800 outfits and not a single hanger in the house. You know, so their
Clothes everywhere.
clothes were everywhere, and you know, as you go through, you know that it's not healthy living, and so I take a picture of it and I do a corrective action saying, we're going to give you 14 days to have the home cleaned. We'll come back and take a look at it because I can evict for cause. Because in our lease it says that you'll maintain the premises in a clean and sanitary manner. Now, clean is subjective, but a reasonable person would look at that and say that's not clean,
Yeah.
right?
There's a difference between clean
You know, there's a pair of socks and a pair of
clean
underwear on the floor versus everything
Hoarding.
you own.
and hoarding.
You know, everything you own on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a difference between.
So that would be a permissible purpose on there. And so there's a balance out there, but I think if you have that communication with the landlord, they will.
I think a landlord is there to, in general, give the tenant an opportunity to voice anything that they've heard. Just put their own eyes on the property. It's not there. They're not there to be intrusive, or they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
They're just there to check on things.
We go with the purpose to look for risk. You know, like what if there's that pinhole leak
Yeah.
coming from somewhere? The tenant may not always look at it because until they see water out on the floor, they may not know that it's slowly dripping and causing damage to the cabinet.
I think it's important for a tenant to know that they're there to protect the property.
Yeah.
Are there any health or safety concerns regarding that property that might cause harm to the property, but also the tenants? And when you live in a property, you may not always think of those things. So it's good to have a fresh eyes come in, especially someone who's got a duty to the property owner to make sure that property is being taken care of, and that there's no problems that's going to damage or harm a tenant. And so keep that in mind as you live there. Are there any health or safety concerns or issues with this property?
Well,
those need to be addressed.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I've gone into where I've seen mildew in a shower, right? Well, is it mildew in the shower because the tenant isn't cleaning it on a regular basis? Or do I have
Fans.
a pipe behind the wall that's not doing it, or the fan that's not
The fan
working?
may not be
to apply
working.
moisture?
Yeah.
And so we want to get that corrected, because mildew unchecked can cause thousands of dollars of damage, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's black mold.
And hundreds of thousands of dollars of health
Yeah.
to a tenant if there's mold.
But
If
the
there is
tenant-
mold in it.
Yeah, but if the tenant's causing it, then it's the tenant's
Sure.
liability, but it could damage a home. But if it is something that the landlord has a responsibility for, they have a right and obligation
Yeah.
to mitigate that, right?
Yep.
At the end of the day, the state of Utah's done a good job with their Fit Premise Act that gives tenants a good support out there, and that protects the landlords equally out
Yeah.
there. But I think the purpose of the inspection is also to look at, other conditions of the lease that are being met. So if you're responsible for yard care, it's the landlord's opportunity to verify that he has taken care of the yard, and it also gives an opportunity to say that there's somebody coming up as an expense to the homeowner, that they might need to go take care of trees. We kind of talked about that earlier. It kind of gives that pulse out there of what's going on. They might look at things like the roof, and it might be time to tell the homeowner, hey, your roof is starting to show wear and tear on it. Has nothing to do with you as a tenant. It's just protecting that asset.
Yeah.
That's the duty of a property manager, is to be the eyes and ears for that homeowner at the same time. So they have a duty for that.
That's good for a tenant to understand that relationship, because that property manager is there to, if a tenant can help the property manager do their job for the property owner, then I believe that relationship with the property manager and the tenant just compounds. It really strengthens. They're not there to get in your business as a tenant. They're there to protect their client, who is the property owner.
Now, if you are doing something shady like cooking meth,
Get rid of it before they come.
But shame on you for doing that. But if you're doing things that are openly against the terms of the lease, then you should be called out on it, right? You shouldn't be surprised about it.
Yeah, if you're being dishonest, you're a dishonest person.
Yeah. But
Own it.
the tenant or the landlord really wants to keep people in there. They don't like disruption, but they just want to make sure that things are being cared for in the home.
So how often should a landlord or a property manager be inspecting? How often should that happen?
And I've seen it across the board. I think monthly is just too doggone often. That's intrusive in my opinion. As a best practice, our company does 4 inspections a year. 2 are scheduled with the tenant that we actually go into the property. 2 are not scheduled, just drive-bys. We don't even get out of the car. We just drive by and say, it looks like they're taking care of the place. And it really is that simple.
Okay, so they don't even know. They just, when you drive.
It's not an announcement, but let's say they do have, 5 vehicles in the yard, and 3 of them aren't working, they're up on blocks, and they got oil dripping out. I'm going to probably send a notice of that, because there's certain laws that we have to follow, whether it's a city ordinance or a homeowners association that requires the property's exterior to be of a certain standard. And so we hold to those standards. But you should care as a tenant as well, on there. So being respectful. So but that's our company's practice on there. But the lease again could state more frequently, or not all. I happen to know there's a company here in town, I won't mention names, that's not the purpose of it here, but that never do inspections. And they're one of the companies that will tend to take most of your deposit or withhold it back. And so I think as a tenant, if you're really serious about getting your deposit back, you should welcome the inspection, because it's an opportunity for you to stay on top of those expectations. It's an opportunity for my work to reinforce what's important to them.
Yeah.
So there's 2 ways of looking at inspections. Do I want to be adversarial to it and create barriers, or do I want to use it to my advantage to strengthen my position in future negotiations, and also future getting my deposit back, because we kept good records of things in the home.
So that might be a good question to bring up again when you're signing a lease, is ask the landlord when and how often they're going to be doing that lease agreement. If you're not comfortable with every month, might be a situation you want to get into.
Yeah.
Like cancel. You don't enter that lease, or see if they'll change. And do it every quarter.
Yeah.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
So, excellent points. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion for today. We're right at that 1 hour mark.
Yeah.
So I think it was good.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and again, it's Tenant Solutions Facebook group. Right now it's an open group. You do have to click to join, but the barriers of entry are pretty light right now. You know, if you can fog a mirror and have a pulse, you're in, you know, type thing. Anyhow, thanks for joining us today.